Chapter 2. The wind increased, bringing with it the chill of the evening as dusk settled on the prairie. Zeke shivered and pulled his overcoat tighter. Faint outlines of the homes came into view. The sun eased into the west and made quaint silhouettes of each building. He followed a narrow walking path leading into the edge of town. Squinting in the fading light, he looked for a main street. The path from the creek was not the main road, or a road at all. He trudged through the outskirts of town, leading his horse. He yearned for a real bed, but he needed a livery, hopefully adjoined to a smithy and farrier. And ideally, all of this would be near a warm supper. He complained aloud in a high falsetto. "A few miles downstream," she said. "You'll find the bridge," she said. "Can't miss it," she said. "Heavens and stars and all things holy. If I don't find a warm dinner tonight, I'll know who to blame." He looked up. "Sorry, God, you know I don't mean it." Except maybe he did this time. The events of the past few hours had put him in a sour mood. Blasted chipmunk. That afternoon, Susie Girl had joyfully galloped through the grass for near 3 miles before she ran out of steam. The haze of smoke he'd been riding toward was now behind him. There was no way the girl had toted the toddler this far, though her family likely lived on a homestead. He must have missed the bridge already. After a quick turn, he headed back the way he'd come. That's when he noticed something wrong with Susie Girl's gait. An examination revealed a missing shoe. "I'm sorry, girl." He rubbed her shoulder and leaned into her. "We'll get you fixed up." Taking the reins, he led her back along the creek, pushing through the undergrowth and searching carefully for anything that could be considered a bridge. They traveled back 2 miles at this slow pace when he saw a string of large rocks crossing the creek. Certainly this isn't a bridge. But it was the most obvious crossing that included a lower bank on each side to accommodate an easy descent to the creek bed. "This is spiteful. If a man asked you to point the way, would you tell him this is a bridge? No, you would not. You would never set out to intentionally misdirect a starving, lonely, incredibly handsome, courteous, witty—" He ran out of adjectives. "You wouldn't, would you?" Susie nuzzled his shoulder and snorted. "I don't need your sympathy. In fact, I'm the one feeling sorry for you, you hear?" Zeke's stomach answered this time. He groaned at the thought of eating beans and hardtack again. The afternoon sprint had been fueled by his visions of dinner. He now stared at the line of rocks and pictured himself seated at a table with a full plate of fried chicken, freshly baked biscuits on the side, the kind with the crust that flaked all over the plate, still warm from the oven, with butter melting off the edge. There'd be a heap of green beans and mashed potatoes. After scraping his plate clean, he would order a slice or two of apple pie, or raspberry, or cherry. Any kind would do. At 20 years old, he knew better than to lick the plate. Only little boys who knew their mothers weren't looking would lick the plate. Very little boys. Unless the pie was warmed with the gooey insides that spread across the plate, and if there just happened to be ice cream to melt on top of it, and perhaps he wasn't in a very fancy establishment, and there weren't too many people about. Without waiting for his lead, Susie Girl pushed past him, yanking the reins from his hand, and waded into the water, stopping midway to drink her fill. He picked up the line where it lay on the water and yanked her back. "You think you outrank me? I'm the brains of this outfit. If I say it's not a bridge, it's not a bridge. I didn't say for sure it wasn't a bridge, but it's not a bridge. But it was a crossing. If there was a path on the other side, he would take it." He tugged off his boots and socks and shoved them into the saddlebag. As an afterthought, he unbuckled his gun belt and strapped it to the saddle, just to be safe. Carefully, he made his way across the rocks, with Susie Girl splashing along beside him. "Fried chicken," he told her, "the kind you can sink your teeth into and come away with a bite that melts in your mouth. Crispy, fresh, juicy. You can peel the skin off if you want. Eat it first, breaded and browned to perfection. The inside will be white and tender." He groaned. "What I would do for some fried chicken right now." His mouth watered. Halfway across the creek, an owl hooted directly overhead, startling him out of his dinner dreams. He shot his gaze over his shoulder, searching for the bird that must be only a few feet away. The rock he stood on wobbled, and the movement of the water did nothing to help his balance. His arms flapped at the air, trying to stay on the precarious rock, which wasn't nearly as sturdy as a bridge. He teetered on the ball of his foot, with one heel hanging off and the other leg wild and unsteady. The horse decided it was a good time to jerk the other way toward the bank. There was no helping it. With a yelp, Zeke jumped. Landing on his feet in knee-high water, he gasped at the cold. Zeke's leg tangled in the reins, and they pulled tight when Susie Girl clambered to the side of the creek. All at once, he found himself swept off his feet, submerged in frigid water that stole his breath. Splashing like a wild man, he was unable to keep any part of himself dry. The water rushed over his head and muffled his curse. Susie Girl stopped on the high bank and turned to look at him as he floundered. He sucked in air when he came up before sending all of his frustration at his horse. "Dad blame it, Suze! You trying to drown me? Sakes alive!" A shiver coursed through him involuntarily from his core to fingers. Irritation welled up, and he hollered accordingly, hitting the water with both hands. He trudged out and stood at the edge. The sand and pebbles pushed between his toes, and water streamed from his hair, down his face. Wiping his sleeve across his eyes, then shaking his arms and hands of the extra drops, he tried to cool his anger. Blowing and spitting the water from his face, he shook his head and flung drops in all directions like a shaggy dog. A tired, hungry, and wet dog. He yelled at the string of rocks. "My boots are dry!" Heavens, but that water was cold. April was not the season to go swimming, in his opinion, and the afternoon heat had long passed. His trousers clung uncomfortably to his legs. Zeke didn't relish the idea of swimming fully dressed, no matter the season. He shrugged out of his vest and suspenders and began unbuttoning his shirt. Midway, he paused to wipe the water that continued to drip from his hair and into his eyes. "Where's my hat? Please, don't let it be gone." A man needed a hat. Scanning along the shore downstream, he spied it in a tangle of branches. "Susie Girl," he began in all seriousness, "you will stay." After looking her in the eye, he shook his head and tied her to the closest tree. If she decided to wander off in the wrong direction, he was in no mood to go after her. A man needed a horse, and a horse that didn't mind was better than no horse at all. Sucking in a breath, he waded back into the cold for his hat. A few minutes later, after drip-drying and changing what he could, he picked out a path through the trees and followed it over a rise in the prairie. From the top, he could view the whole town. Relief flooded him. "Thank you, Lord." It was larger than he'd expected. He was arriving from the east. The main road he could make out led from south to north. His hopes of a hot dinner were rapidly fading. He saw no people in the dim light and heard no sounds of village life. The shops were long closed, and folks were retired for the evening. His head ached from the earlier tumble, and he was wet and muddy. He looked a mess. He was a mess. Days of patchy stubble protruded from his face, and was looking more like a beard every day. If only he could fill it in. When he found his way to the livery, he was greeted by Frank, a balding man whose white beard made up for any hair that was missing from his head. He refused to negotiate a lower boarding fee. "I'll take no less than $3, the man repeated. Zeke scratched the back of his neck. "For one night? A week maybe would be fair for that amount, but I'll not pay it for a night. That's downright robbery." Not to mention he didn't have it. And even if he did, he wouldn't spend it boarding a horse and starve himself. The man's stringy whiskers twitched out of the way as he shot a stream of tobacco juice onto the barn floor. As was Zeke's habit, he'd saved just enough from the last stop to board them both and buy a few meals on the side, with plans to find immediate work before starting west again. He'd begun the journey with limited funds and, for the most part, had enjoyed the eclectic jobs and people he'd met. He knew it would take an eternity to reach the ocean this way, but it was part of the fun for him. Another shot of juice barely missed Zeke's boots. "I'm not standing here all night watching you scratch your head," Frank said. "Fine," Zeke sighed. "Can I work for it? I can do anything that needs doing." There was always work to be done. 3 weeks of travel, and he had not been forced to shake the dust from his feet yet.